I really must give a plug-in. I call it a plug-in. If you've watched any of my videos and cross-referenced them, I use certain terminology that references other information that's held in a blood bank memory water. And so I was watching one of her earlier presentations when she talked about the abductions as an indigo, right? And how valuable the DNA is and why it's so valuable. Particularly when you begin to understand how manifestation templates actually work between pre-phase matter, pure consciousness, outside in the primal light and sound field, okay? And then experiencing itself. I can experience it myself sometimes just on my own phone. You can see a flash of light. It's like in and out, flashes on, flashes off, because it happens so fast, right, that it's undetectable. That's a stealth code. And so for a particular being, when you think in terms of learning and evolution and what's known as the learning curve potential, which means a unit of consciousness, the potential that a unit of consciousness has to evolve, okay, in which it can travel anywhere in the entire universal and galactic template by its ability to do what? Maintain its balance. And she referred to how a manifestation template occurs in matter phase form. Form follows function, the spirit form of the energy, which means when the template itself, when the universal and galactic template is in perfect balance, that means that the fission and the fusion, that's the male and female side. That's why when you're one, when you're a mono, which is androgynous, it means that the energy, the fusion and the fission that's taking place is in perfect balance. That's a nuclear reactor, okay? Just like the nucleus of a cell. So when you're running on eternal power, right, that's a single point. That's the center point from which it all began. Because anybody knows what a fire ring is, right? And what we know is the base of the fire. The center point of where that fire began, ask any wildland firefighter when they're doing an investigation, what are they looking for? The point of origin. The point in which a flashpoint ignited a coil. That coil goes vertical, doesn't it? Now you see the spirit that is in the fire, which is the form. Now you're seeing the lines, which are the waves of that fire, which is the light. That's called a water table column distribution of log scales. Log in, log out. How fast can you log in and log out? Of what? Where you're at. Here, right? In this planetary field of consciousness and software operating systems. That's why I mentioned to you when I had lit myself on fire in 2016, and that was a big year. And why it happened in 2016 versus 2009 or 1981. Why I came in 51, right? The relationship that I had with the island of Kauai. What happened there when I was there in the early 1970s? Why I happened to come to this island, right? In January of 2017, right? Okay, so in other words, it's like these are not coincidences, right? And when we're making what we call movements, you know, like the military uses terminology like troop movements, right? Tracking, surveillance, and all the rest of it, right? So they can't track a stealth code. Okay? That's a genius. That's the gift of being connected to the eternal sound and light field. So I operate on behalf of the one, the law of one. So I'm the law of one, which is the law of spheres, which is the law of least effort. To experience what love is, it goes on forever. Right? That's as simple as it gets. To explain it, I am what love is. Be what love is. So another way that you could sort of think about this and cross-translate this across the electromagnetic spectrum, because I did this when I was an engineer. So you, in the fire department circles of light, fire light, in wildland protection, which is where I started, you have what's called an engineer's compartment. Compartmentalized information that's based on math codes of what we see on the hologram. What was I seeing in the hologram? What was called a compartment, which is called the engineer's compartment. This is where all they are called fittings, plumbing, water worlds. The pathway of water is traveling through couplings and hose, right? In this case, this was cotton jacketed, rubber lined hose, right? So if you went up to an engineer at any fire station and said, hey, will you show me your engineer's compartment? He will probably take you where you see all the nozzles, all the couplings, what are known as fittings and what are known as adapters. Adapting, right, to the difference, if you will, modalities that we're going to apply the fittings and the couplings that connect to the hose and to the hydrant, if you will, the source of water. Because water is the most effective, extinguishing agent to cut off a tetrahedron, a four-square intersection on a gyrodome, a gyroscope. So chances are he will tell you that when you look at the threaded end of a hose line, right, what's known as a male. So the male is threaded, right, which is called a coupling. That's called the male end. So you see the thread. Now you can cross-translate that into a plug. Like when you plug, the plug into the socket, the wall socket, where you're getting, your 110, 60 hertz, 220 amps of electrical service. Okay, so the socket, you have the socket and the plug. So the plug is the penis, the male, okay? So you have the male, the plug connecting into the socket, the female. Now you got light. So the electric and the light orchestra. So now you're running water through the line, right? And they have a term that they call friction loss. There are a couple other handy terms you might want to plug into this to translate this across the electromagnetic spectrum when it comes to fission and fusion, becoming one, which is a mono, which is androgynous. Okay, about the difference between what we call residue or residual pressure. And it just so happens, okay, ask any wildland firefighter, ask any engineer working at any fire station why it is they're actually losing less friction. There is less friction loss, which means there's less loss. Okay, the larger the diameter of the hose is the less effort, the least amount of effort that the pump and using energy, mechanical energy, in this case, burning fuel, right, which is consciousness. Gaia's the planetary consciousness field, which is the oil, which has gone to a refinery, right, and then it becomes a fuel. You put the fuel in the tank. Now you can run the pump. In this particular case, we had two pumps. One was what we called a piss pump, which was an auxiliary pump, which means it was connected to the tank with water, but it wasn't connected to the drivetrain of a power takeoff that was up front in the cab that had a switch on it. So now you can run the main pump off the motor of the engine, right? Depending on how big the engine is. You want to see a big pumper, go down to the LA City Fire Department, right? And their fireboats, or LA or New York City fireboats, or Seattle's fireboats, right? Take a look at them big pumps. Now, naturally, they're running stainless steel because of the saltwater corrosion, right? Instead of running water through a hydrant system. But the point in this is that when you come up to a hydrant and it's capped, what we call capped, that's called static pressure, like static electricity, right? The current in the water, the sonic current in the water, sonic waves that's in the water. It means the water's under pressure. So as soon as you open that hydrant, open that valve, right? That's residual pressure, which means that's pressure that is naturally running when it begins to equalize itself under what? Atmospheric pressure conditions between high pressure and low pressure. Because it's seeking to be in what? An N-equal state, which is the law of least effort, which is the law of spheres. Now you're into water worlds, now you're into fire. Now we're back to thermal gradients. Now we're back to the relationship between 1 and 300 and 301. Remember, one molecule of H2O will cool 300 units of heat, thermal heat. You can translate that if you want into a BTU, which is a British thermal unit. So now you can actually predict how much water it's going to be able to take in order to cool the tetrahedron. Break it down. All you have to do is remove one element. Remove the fuel, remove the air, right? Make sure the gas isn't going to burn, and the heat. So that's why water is an effective agent. Agent Smiths. Agents, agencies. And so she does a really beautiful job at some of the workshops that I see, that she pours out all this information. It's like the great remembering. Yeah. And you can see why, from a control perspective, when you're not experiencing yourself running an eternal fire engine, the engine of creation. If you're not experiencing the eternal engine of creation, and now you're experiencing something wanting to control what it is that you are, you already realize there's no way they can control that engine. Why? Because it's running too hot. They cannot put that fire out. They cannot put that ignition point out. They cannot put that flash point out. That fire will always burn, which is that light, which is the purifiers. Essentially an androgynous being, just like Michelle Martin will tell you, that the light that they run when it's perfectly balanced means you're essentially running on maximum output or maximum input, which is maximum fire. And that allows you to do what? Maintain a crystalline shield on a planetary level, galactic level, universal level. Because you're in balance with all creation. That means that both sides of the equation, the negative and the positive, are in perfect balance. Right? And so that's why when you're at the center point of it all, between the center point of every star, every cell, then it means that we're gifting electrons, real stuff, right? Because you're experiencing love. It goes on forever. Gifting at high accelerating rate of speed. And that allows you to run a hyperspeed drive motor. And a hyperspeed drive motor with crystal consciousness allows you to do what? Maintain your shield for the work that you do. Right? Which is to maintain the love engine. I call it a love engine, love energy being. I'm a love energy being. Right? To maintain your crystalline shield. So now you can go have a blast, go have fun, enjoy the universe. That's what we created it for. Right? So I've always known this ever since I was a little child. I always want to capture stuff, right? Capture energy. It's under our control. You know, because nobody wants to delegate authority, nor do they want to give up control to some other group, some other star nation, right? So it's not about control. It's about balance. Okay? It's exactly what it is. It's about balance, which means I'm not in a fight with anybody, right? I'm giving love to everything that is alive and living in creation, right? So you can see how that is when you're a little kid, you know, watching people war against each other in their mirrors against other races. So one of the things that was actually pretty important that she happened to mention about why the root races, for example, went to a particular template that would allow for others in the universe, if you will, seeded races, to be able to come together to experience each other in a state of peace, which means our ability to communicate with each other is in perfect balance with each other, so we're not having to fix gates all the time, if you will. Remember, I mentioned that on a video I did a while back. What a polarity integrator actually does, because I've experienced this, so I know what it's like to do this, it's called clearing the debris field. Fragments, right? Shatter, pieces of crystalline shield that have been shattered off. Because that's their goal. When they realize the drive motor that you're running in order to run the shield that you are, like the planetary shield, the planet shield, they want to break the planet shield. That's the same thing as hacking into planetary DNA template. Or, if you will, hacking into a universal and galactic template. Why? Control. That's what it is. Don't kid yourself. It's exactly what it is. One group doesn't want to give up control to another group. Another group doesn't want to give up control to another group. Because control is born out of fear. Now we're back to holding one electron captive. Because when you've chosen to serve forever on behalf of the one, which means eternity, now you're not holding one electron captive, which is one unit of consciousness captive. You're giving it all away. So that every unit of consciousness that exists within the entire universal and galactic template is experiencing what love is. Imagine that. That's who we are. That's why we're here.